I need that. I'll be talking about that. There it is. Hi, everyone. I think I'm waiting on my brother, which happened a few times in my life. He and I are 10 years apart in age. He was the baby in our family. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and we have been coming. I was telling, and remind me your names. Yes, thank you. I was telling them that I have been coming up to Crosslake since our parents retired up here over 30 years ago. And so it feels like home whenever I come up. And it was very nice of you to develop some snow for me this morning. I've been waiting. And I don't know if there will be much down in the cities when I go home or not. So I'm looking forward to the drive. While we're waiting, just by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with seasonal affective disorder? Oh, that's great. That will help me because I'll spend some time talking with you about my experience and some of the things I've learned, and then also spend some time hearing from you and spending some time with each other talking about things that help, that are beneficial, ways this has played out in your life, and what can be done. So I told them I'm used to waiting for you.
Yeah, as you are. Adjust your mic real quick. Just bring it up a little bit.
That better?
There we go.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll turn mine on this time. Again, if you're new to the Logchurch, first of all, welcome. We have a mental health ministry at this church that launched actually all the way back in about 2015. And we, once a month or every so often, like to do what's called awareness forums. For our mental health ministry, we have what's called 3 legs of the stool. That we've learned that for a mental health ministry, you got to have. One is awareness. There's just a lot of stuff we don't understand and we don't know. And so we just occasionally, once a month, we'll do these forums to just learn. Learn about depression, learn about bipolar, learn about whatever. And today we're going to learn about seasonal affective disorder. And what we love these to be is less of sometimes they're a kind of formal presentation, sometimes they're more of a conversation. And this is probably going to be more the latter, more of a conversation today. Just kind of depends, because each one you learn a lot through. So if you have a question or get ready to have a question, just write it down or get ready for it. Know that we will have time for that today and doing that as well. And then another thing that we do is what's called second leg of our stool, just so that you know, the 3 is support. That we offer support groups. And the support groups sometimes are online. Sometimes the support groups are grief share, everything from alcohol or addiction support to, we've done support groups for men in the past, support groups for women. We've got a lot of different, I don't know what we're going to offer in January. We just kind of wait for you to tell us, and maybe we should do a support group. One we're talking about right now is a support group for people that have adult children who have walked away from the faith, or the term is being called estrangement, that they have they're in a relationship that they don't talk with their adult children, and that's really hard on parents, and parents don't know what to do when that's going on. So we're probably going to start a support group for people that are in that situation. So that's just who the Logchurch is. We look to offer support groups that meet for different times and different places, and some are online. And then the third area is counseling. We know that the percentage of people that struggle with mental health conditions, currently, in Crosslake community, there are 2 counselors that each spend 1 day a week here in Crosslake. That's it. So there's obviously greater need than that. And one of the reasons why people don't get counseling is if they have to travel a distance to get it. Well, of course, imagine if you had to go all the way to Brainerd today, how many would say I probably just wouldn't go? And if this snowstorm would have happened on a Monday or on whatever. So God has now provided in just a miraculous way for us we're headed towards putting a Christian counseling center in this town that is going to begin with one counselor and then hopefully grow to have multiple counselors at it that will be serving the greater Crosslake community. So more information to come on that. So our mental health ministry is something the Logchurch has been called to and something that we are serious about. And so welcome to this layer of what we do. And can we welcome my sister Shirlee, who's going to lead for us today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a million. I'm here because I have seasonal affective disorder. And I also have spoken with you about, I also have major depressive disorder or clinical depression, and they are two separate things. And so it's always a good opportunity for me to be here with you because it allows me time to prepare, to think, to regather my strategies, and to also hear from you. It has been very good for me to be here. So what I'll be talking about a little bit is some basic facts about seasonal affective disorder, or also called seasonal depression, and my personal experience with it. Also, what has helped me, both things that I can do on my own and ways that I seek professional help. And then I also want to just say a few special words about seniors and seasonal affective disorder, because there are some things there that can be especially of help to seniors. And I have officially joined that category. So I'm following my own cues here. So I asked just a moment ago how many had experience with seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression, and it was a large show of hands. And so you know something about this, and as do I. So a few facts about seasonal depression. First of all, and I'll kind of do these in a true-false fashion, statement number one, true-false, SAD is a subset of depression. And that is true in that it shares many of the same symptoms as clinical depression. And we'll talk about some of those symptoms when I talk about the way it plays out for me. But it is also different in some ways from clinical depression in that it has a seasonal component to it. It comes and it goes. Statement number two, true-false. SAD is feeling glum for a few days. Well, actually, SAD, although all of us feel glum for more than a few days in the wintertime, if you have winter onset seasonal affective disorder. It's typically like depression in that the symptoms need to be present and quite and affect your life in quite a few ways for at least a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks with no signs of let up. And so in that way, it's different from the winter blues. And many times people talk about winter blues and SAD as the same thing, and they really are different. So another true-false, SAD is more prevalent in women. That is also true. The research that I was able to find on my massive internet search was hard to find as to reasons why. There's not a lot of research on seasonal depression, although there's more coming. There's some studies on the East Coast about seasonal affective disorder, but there's a lot of things we don't know about causal factors yet. And the last one, true-false, SAD can be a winter onset or a spring onset. And it is actually true that it can be both, one or the other usually for a particular individual. And it's much more common that it has a winter onset that times with the lack of sunlight as our days shorten. And so that is why it often gets called the seasonal blues as well. But there is a spring onset seasonal affective disorder that has its own set of depressive factors, and especially for people with bipolar, there can also be a mania component with spring onset. And so I'll talk a little bit more about when it's good to get professional help, and especially so with bipolar, as you look for correct diagnoses and understanding how the SAD might play out in your life, your loved one's life. So that's just a few basic tips. There are some wonderful websites that you can go to that will give you lots of in-depth information about SAD, much more than I can give you here today. And some of those are the mayoclinic.org. That has a wonderful website for symptoms and symptom relief. The National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, and then NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. All three of those are sites you can dig into and find out more information. So I want to talk a little bit about how SAD plays out in my life. And I was just awed by the Mary presentation this morning. And also I had an opportunity to hear your previous forum on eating disorders. And I was especially personally impacted by how the presenter talked about the brain and eating disorders, and how her brain gave her rules to follow when it came to her eating disorder. And the reason I resonated with that is because the brain in seasonal affective disorder also gives me messages. And from the time it starts to the time it leaves, my general frame of mind is that there are 4 things that affect me. First of all, I want to eat carbs, which many of us do in the winter. But the cravings are definitely different than the summertime. I sleep more, I crave sleep more. And this can be something that is disruptive to work, to my daily life. Secondly, or thirdly, I guess it is, I feel really bad about myself. I find it difficult to, and as you'll be able to tell a little bit, I'm starting into that season, and I have a tendency to think that everything I do is less or not as good, or that I'm just not worthy of what it is that I need to do. And finally, it encourages me to stay home and stop socializing. The idea in the winter of just being able to say no to invitations is so strong, and it takes a special kind of friend, which I have several, who will kind of bust past that and invite me repeatedly sometimes because of that urge to just stay home. So a couple other aspects of SAD for me, besides the eat, sleep, feel bad about myself, and stay home, is that I find SAD is very sneaky in that it doesn't have a day of onset. It isn't something that I can say, wow, December 15th, I know, I'll be prepared and I'll be ready. the symptoms creep up. For instance, I might find myself extra irritable, and I find myself saying, now why did I say that? Where did that come from? Also, I don't know when it's going to leave in the spring. My SAD appears sometime in usually late December, early January, and continues as late as mid-May. And so I don't know when it's going to be over. Other than that, I start feeling like what I call I'm in my own skin. I'm feeling like myself. And I'm feeling more positive, and I'm feeling like engaging with people, and I'm feeling like I don't need any naps today, and I'm feeling like it's a lot easier to eat healthy. So I want to say a word about clinical depression versus SAD, in that I can go through periods of remission with clinical depression. I've had 5-7 years of no appearances of clinical depression, but yet SAD will still appear for me most every year. You can have breaks from SAD as well, and some of it's dependent on winter factors. Some of it depends on how well I'm doing those at-home, take care of myself things and seeing my therapist. So I want to also say a word about COVID and SAD, in that COVID, in a strange way, supports those negative feelings that eat, sleep, feel bad about myself, and stay home, in that it's easy for COVID to tell me, yeah, you really should stay home. It's not quite a safe world out there, and it's another reason why I can choose to stay put. And so COVID is another factor that if you have loved ones with seasonal affective disorder, just recognize that that has been another layer added on to this. So I journal a lot. And that's been one of the things I want to spend some time on, what helps. And I wanted to just share a couple of resources with you. One is, this is called the Prayer Map for Women, and there's a prayer map for men as well, and I got it on christianbooks.com. And it's not a journal that you have that you feel like, oh, it's December 3rd, I better write on December 3rd. You just write as you feel like it. And this journal really holds for me what I can use to look back. And especially, you'll see some things earmarked, and those are summer journal entries, because they remind me during the winter times that there is another side and it's coming. And so I can look into this and really remind myself. Another resource that I've found on the same christianbooks.com is 365 Days of Prayer for Depression and Anxiety. And this I find especially good. And it is for every single day of the year, but you know, I don't get to every single day, but many times it speaks into the depression symptoms and the anxiety symptoms as well. So I just recommend those. So what helps me with seasonal affective disorder, seasonal depression? The good personal practice things, the things you can do without professional help, is number one, seasonal affective disorder. A key difficulty for those with seasonal affective disorder is the short lengths of daylight. And so the more that I can be outside in the daylight is my best shot at getting vitamin D. And vitamin D is something that without it, it can have symptoms that mimic seasonal affective disorder. And so I'll talk a little bit about seniors and getting vitamin D levels checked, but it's a good practice for anyone. If it's difficult to get outside, another option is what they call the SAD lights. And it's another way of getting light indoors. And you can purchase these lights online. I did use my therapist to help me discern what's a good quality SAD light. And the lights have a certain number of lumens and they simulate daylight. And so typically people with SAD will sit in front of the light or next to it for a period of 20 to 30 minutes first thing in the morning. And that's been shown to have a lot of good effect on the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder. I struggle with it sometimes just because, as I've talked about before, I'm not the most disciplined person in the world. And so getting myself to do that every day is something that if I do it, it does help. And so you can read a lot about SAD lights online, but I think talking with a doctor or a therapist for how it works best for you is recommended. So that sunlight, daylight, SAD light portion is a big part of how to help with the symptoms. Eating a healthy diet is also helpful. If you can get in the rhythm of eating a healthy diet in the fall, it can help with those carb cravings in the wintertime. They don't go away, but it can be helpful. I also want to mention exercise and movement. Just any kind of movement helps with depressive symptoms and those same symptoms in SAD. So I was fortunate enough to get a new puppy this year and just turned a year old, and that's my get out of Dodge into the sunlight path. And so that's that can be very helpful. So also can just finding someone who can maybe walk with you just a couple of times a day. And finally, one of the things I do is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, has a large number of online and in-person support groups. And they don't have much for specific to seasonal affective disorder, but they do offer depression support groups year-round. And I will often opt in to a support group because the groups are come and go all the time. And so I will often opt into one starting in the late fall and then continue as a place for support year-round or through the summer. And that is another way that it helps me. Finally, how do you know when it's important to seek professional help in the form of a therapist or a psychiatrist? Because medications are also an option for seasonal affective disorder. And so I kind of use 4 factors that have helped me determine when to seek professional help. First of all, if the symptoms are interrupting with daily life, like I talked about earlier, if you're finding it difficult to get to work in the morning, or you have days where you just can't get there, that's one of the things that might take you to someone that can help with that symptom. Also, appetite changes or a significant amount of weight gain or weight loss is a good indicator that professional help would be in order. Irritability that is affecting your relationships, and that's a tough one because we all have times of irritability, and it's a natural human thing. But if it's the kind of thing where I noticed sometimes that when I was at work, I retired in January, but when I would find myself getting short with people, especially I worked with a lot of undergraduate students, and then I worked with staff, and then I worked with faculty. And I would find myself much more short-tempered in the wintertime. I have a little sign that hangs I had it at work, and now I have it at home that says, "Excuse me for what I said during winter." So that's kind of a reminder for me that it's good to check in with my therapist. And finally, if you're feeling so overwhelmed or experiencing suicidal thoughts, which can come with seasonal affective disorder, that's an immediate check-in with a professional that you don't wait on. And so I know the church here has access to resources for that kind of help. And so that can be a call that you make too. So what does therapy do for me? A lot. There's someone there that knows me and knows that there's a summer me and a winter me. And we talk a lot about strategies starting in early fall. And we start with goal setting. And we talk about how I can prepare myself. One of the ways I prepare is my therapist urges me to get social check-ins on my calendar throughout the fall, continued into the winter, so that they're there on my calendar. And it's a little harder to say no because people have it on their calendar too. So a therapist also can help me explore coping mechanisms, can help diagnose, is this clinical depression for me or is it seasonal? And as a result of the diagnosis, then can cue me towards treatment, whether I work with my psychiatrist on a change of medication or whether I use more of those at-home kind of ways of coping. And finally, it can help me challenge my negative thoughts. You know, when I'm really going on and on about how difficult life is. This person who has seen me in my, really upbeat moments can say, "You're in there, Sherry." It's just a little harder to find this time of year. So before we take it to time for questions and a sharing of from you as well, I wanted to talk a little bit about seniors and SAD and how important it is to get that vitamin D check. As we age, our ability to take in vitamin D from the sun, that ability lessens as we age. And so knowing your current vitamin D level can be very, very helpful. Also, medications can mess with vitamin D levels. And so I have my vitamin D level checked at least annually, if not sometimes twice a year, so that we can adjust that accordingly. For those of you with people in your lives that are seniors, it means so much when you reach out and then you maybe reach out again. Because we are a little hesitant about coming out of our shell. And so keeping that in mind, keeping something on the calendar, just a phone call, a text, anything is very helpful. And just a word about retirement, COVID, and SAD. Is that can be a triple whammy, having retired this year, and the wonderful things that come with retirement are many, but it's definitely an adjustment. And with COVID, with retirement, with being alone in my house, it sometimes in the wintertime can make for just additional difficulties. And so just to be aware of that with your loved one too. So what I thought I'd do, when I was internet searching and having fun doing that, I ran across some let's have fun with sad, quick little quips. And so since Mark's the professional speaker in the family, I thought I would have him just read those with zest.
So I think these are good. These are ways that your brain tricks you, or how your brain thinks. So you've got seasonal affective disorder, but it's summer. So your brain's telling you it's great to just step outside without a jacket and without my seasonal depression. That's how you feel in the summer. But when it's a cloudy week and your brain gets you thinking, I don't think I have seasonal affective disorder. I'm probably just like this all the time. But then the second the sun comes out, bam, my depression is cured. I don't have it anymore. Or in the winter, in the dead of winter, but it's noon, and it happens to be or around noontime, and it's sunny, then I feel like my seasonal affective disorder is just fake news. But then at about 6:24, when the sun is gone, I start to think, why has God forsaken me? So that's how I feel. And then when finally the weather, it's early March, and we get that first 50 to 60 to 70 degree and sunny day, and I feel for the first time like, wow, I now love life again. I love people. Do you want a hug to share this beautiful day? Here, take my debit card. That's how I feel.
All true. So we'll just toss it open now for questions, comments. Mark will have, you have a microphone?
Yes,
or?
what I'll do is repeat your question. And so if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll repeat it so the people that are live streaming can capture it. But let me ask this one just to lead out with, Sherry, is I think some people misunderstand and think, hey, with seasonal affective disorder, all I need to do is get away for a couple weeks to Arizona, spend a couple weeks in the sun, and I'll be fine. Is that true? Or is that false?
I wish that were true. I wish that were true. Unfortunately, the symptoms of SAD will probably follow you there. And while the sun in a couple of weeks can do wonders for a temporary kind of feeling good, it doesn't erase the next 2 months that are ahead of you. And I don't know if I'm seeing some nodding of heads, that's a similar feeling. That's maybe if I took a 6-month, that might do something. Yeah, 2 months is helpful.
So what questions does anyone have, or would they like to throw out there? And sometimes it's even just a comment, or my experience with this has been as follows. Yes?
I got a couple comments. I've had it for probably 5 or 6 years, and as I got older, it seemed to get more intense. It doesn't help a lot when I go on vacation. Like you said, you get bouts of really good days, but then all of a sudden you feel it again. I'm taking about 800, 900 IUs of vitamin D, and I heard that your body weight times 40 is kind of a rule of thumb. So me being, 220 pounds, I'm taking at least 8,000, I believe, excuse me.
8,000, yeah.
8,000 IUs, which the recommended daily allowance from the FDA or whatever, I think is 1,000 or 2,000. So that's substantially lower what we should be taking if we deal with SAD. That's what I've heard. Another thing is like alcohol. I know when I go on vacation, I have a couple beers here and a couple beers there and a couple beers here and a couple beers there.
Yep.
And that can help flare up my SAD as well. So when I'm around, winter comes, I try to stay away from alcohol. Yep. Exercise is really, really helpful. And cognitive therapy helps me as well.
And real quickly, let's talk about that cognitive therapy. What is that, Rich?
You know, sometimes
Dan, we'll turn it on a second.
with depression, you don't want to share it, you know? You feel it's a sign of weakness. And I'll even do that with my wife and kids, you know, like, I don't want to tell them, you know. Then my wife goes, well, that's why you said that, you know? And I'm kind of like giving into that. But talking with my wife saying, you know, I'm struggling today. Gosh, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Why did this just flare up? And then she'll talk with me about it. And even if it's a 10, 15-minute conversation, that seems to help, you know, things of that nature. It just comes out of nowhere, you know. And mine comes usually around middle to late November, around this time of year. And like I said, the vitamin D helps. I do have a lamp, but I'm not good at using it. I should be using it daily, really. It's just dealing with it, with any kind of depression, you know. And what it does with me is it flares up my insecurities, like you talked about being hard on yourself. So my insecurities start flaring up, like, you know, retirement, and my body's wearing out, and I don't have those good friendships, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Those insecurities tend to flare up when I get this seasonal affective disorder. That's kind of a good sign to me that it's kicking in. I don't feel that as much in the summer and things of that, you know, that negative thought patterns. So.
And repeat the thing that you shared earlier about the weight-sized.
Yeah, so you take your, let's just use a 200-pound man times 40. So that would be 8,000 IUs. So I'm 220, I'm taking about 9,000 IUs in the wintertime, and I think that's helped.
Amy?
So first off, so sorry that this is a thorn you have to bear. As a nutritionist, that D, you want to take vitamin D3, and you want to make sure it's the kind that starts with CHOLA. I think it's cholecalciferol. Yeah. Kind of like with B12, you only want to take the methyl. There's different kinds your body absorbs. So vitamin D3, and I start all my clients on 5,000 IUs, no matter what they weigh. 5,000 IUs, and if it comes to winter and we need to up it, we up it. But D3, 5,000 IUs, if that helps.
Thank you, Amy.
That's great, thank you.
Someone else, Harold, what would you like to share or ask?
Do I dare make a couple comments here?
I don't know what they're going to be, so.
My wife died 7 years ago, but back in the 60s, she was going to she was having severe depression, shock treatments and the works. One of her treatments was a retired pastor. She would go there once a week, and she would write down during the week everything that transpired, and he would read it and tear it up. And that seemed to be pretty good, but I gotta throw this out to you. Her depression started in the early 60s when we lost a baby, where the lungs didn't open up. I don't know if you remember the President Kennedy's baby. The lungs didn't open up, and they had no treatment for it. But she went into severe depression, shock treatments, and the works. And I had 3 young boys at home, and I had a job, and it was just like living on hell on earth, what I went through. But I got through it, but it was really, it was pretty bad. The church we went to at the time, they felt that people that you're Christians, you shouldn't have depression. And the church did nothing, and it was a church in this western area here. So we did not get much of help from anybody from the church. It was just a lot of, I've never brought this up before in this church. We've been going here 22 years, but depression can be a killer. And there's no treatment for it really unless you really buckle down, and I don't know, it's bad, bad, bad.
Thank you, Harold, for sharing that. No, that wasn't easy for you. Anyone else have a question for Sherry or for anything on seasonal affective disorder that you'd want to share or bring up? Or any other resources? You rattled off NAMI fast. If you've not heard of that, again, what was that website?
It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness is where the support groups can be found. The best general information that I've seen online is mayoclinic.org or NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health. Can be places where if you're a reader like me, you can find much more information than I was able to give you here today about how it plays out.
And if you would have any interest in doing and saying, you know what, maybe we should start a once a week Zoom support group for people that are struggling with SAD. And we just say, if someone would be willing to facilitate that and say, heck, I can set up a Zoom meeting and just whoever joins in, maybe if there's nodding and saying that, how many of you here think that would be helpful to have just a SAD group that you could join? And say, would you be open to that? If you are, then if any of you feel called to say, hey, I wouldn't mind facilitating that. And that's at least, because that could be something to look forward to too, is to say, all right,
Absolutely.
I can process with somebody, no, I'm not alone on that. That's kind of how these support groups get started. We just wait and see if there's a need. And if there is, we start it for a while and then stop it whenever. Any other questions?
I'll ask one.
You bet.
Did you find that there was something in your life that brought it on, or did it just kind of sneak up on you?
You know, I will say that that's where the clinical depression and the SAD differed. The clinical depression, I can point to times that brought it on, stressors in my life that brought it on. And how long it lasted was an unknown, but I could point to triggers. With seasonal, you know, growing up when I did, there wasn't really awareness of it. I just knew that there were times of the year that just seemed much more difficult than others. And it has been one of the kind of the diagnostic criteria for SAD is that you have it at least for a couple of years where you can tell the onset and then it goes away seasonally. I feel like SAD has kind of been with me my whole life. And only in the last, actually since about 10 years ago when I was diagnosed with a clinical depression, that I really felt like the SAD also was treated to where it's a little easier in the wintertime. I can't say that I've really remembered a time where it's ever gone away. You know, it's there in some form every year. So sometimes it's just not as long or not as intense, maybe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just thought that in the awareness part of this, you know, there's things that happen in like maybe in some of my family's life, there might be an event like Harold was talking about that would kind of say, hey, put up the red flag and kind of make sure that that person, whoever it is, you know, I have some attention for them, you know.
Yes, and I think especially so if something, if one of those triggering factors happens during a seasonal depression, you know, that can definitely be an additional trigger to making the SAD symptoms more intense.
And what would you say as we wrap this up would be, what should we not do? like if someone is struggling with, and also, what could the church do better? Let's start with that. What could the church do better for people that struggle with SAD? And then also, what should we also, if I know someone who's got SAD, I know someone like you that struggles with it, it's probably going to be every year. What could I do and or not do? Is there anything we should also, like, that makes it like, don't do this, you know?
I would say, and I'd love to hear from you as well with your experience, because this is a great question, is what not to do is to minimize what it is, that it's real and it affects people and it makes life more difficult. And so, I often have people who will say to me, even good friends who will say, you seem like your mood has been, not so good for the last couple of days. And I want to say, it hasn't been good for a few months. And so the friends that I have really shared this with, they check in with me and see how I'm doing. And they know that our friendship might look a little different in the wintertime, in that I might not reach out in my usual way. And so I would say for the church too, offering up a support group is great. Acknowledging like you do that it's okay to not be okay is really big. And to have resources and to have this publicly talked about is just, you have anything you'd like to add?
I was going to say, for sure, don't isolate. That can enhance it. And alcohol, for sure, is a depressive.
Thank you.
So even if you casually drink, like I casually drink, but I pretty much try to stay away from it in the winter months. And then sleeping, if you oversleep a lot and are taking naps and staying at home too much, you have to stay in community, because we were designed to live in community and support each other. So like, the concert the other night, we came to the concert and Teen Challenge, and you go to this, you go to that, you get out of the house and you see people. That can lift your spirits. You can sometimes trick yourself. I feel that this is a chemical imbalance with the sunlight, but at times I can emotionally trick myself when I'm doing really fun things like playing pickleball and exercising and getting out and going for walks with the dog.
Yep.
I can emotionally trick myself to feeling better, although you're outside, you're not really getting that sunlight, because in the northern hemisphere, we just don't get it after a certain part time of the year. You just don't get it.
Right.
But it feels good, and you trick yourself, and you can have good days that way. I know with daylight savings, when that kicks in, it's like, here we go. That's kind of like a trigger for me that time of year. It's between, October and March. And when daylight savings comes back in March, all of a sudden I'm like, cheering, like, the sun's out until, 5 o'clock now.
Yes.
So those are triggers, but I never really had a major trigger that brought this on. It was casual, and then next winter I noticed it more, and then the next winter I noticed it more. So it just came on, I think, with my age in particular. I'm 57. Around age 50, I started feeling it more.
Yeah, and I think that's a natural age at which you start questioning a lot too, because you're thinking about the next transition of your life. And when you're coming at it from the lens of SAD, it can really make it difficult. Yeah.
Is it okay when you know someone has SAD and that it's going to be there, are you okay if we ask and say, ask people that know you over, hey, how are you doing with that right now? Or would you rather us not talk about it? Is it something you want us to ask about and say, hey, how's your sadness been lately? Or how has your depression been lately? Is that helpful or is that hurtful?
I think that's a very individual thing. Mm-hmm. I think, I've done, with NAMI, I do a lot of speaking with NAMI about, depression. And so I have gotten more comfortable with people asking about it, and it's a positive thing for me because it lets me know that they care and acknowledges that it's a thing. But I think that is a very personal. Some who are new to SAD or just would rather it not be acknowledged. That might be the case
I
too.
think she's right, Mark. It depends on your personality. You know, if you're more of a private person, you're probably not going to want people coming up to you often and saying, "Hey, how's your seasonal affective disorder going?" With me, I'm more open book. You know, I wear it on my sleeves, so
Sure.
I'm open to that. Thank you.
But I think that's good for us to learn. Like, what should we do? Should we say something? Should we not?
My close friends know that it flares up in the winter, and they'll check up on me more often in the winter months.
Yep.
All right, I think we've passed our time limit. We've tried to end these at 11:30. Can we thank Sherry for just her willingness to open up this for us? And if you want to, she'll be around if you want to ask any questions or talk to Sherry a little more afterwards. Thanks, you guys, for giving your time
Thank
for this.
you.
And if you have a topic you think we should cover in the future at one of these, please let me know. And or Jill or Gibbs or talk to any one of us. Or if you know of someone on a topic that you think we should have come do this, please let us know because this is what we love to do, is create these forums like this. So thanks, you guys, for your time.